Thanks for joining the Life's Better podcast, where we say life is so much better with God, community, and purpose. Josh and I are hanging out actually with Chad Helm today. He is the coordinator or the program coordinator for Isaiah House. Isaiah House is a treatment center that really is offering hope for addiction. And we're excited not only to hear about what Isaiah House is doing, but today we're actually going to hear your story.
Yeah.
And I think it's overused oftentimes, hey, we're really excited to have this guest on. I'm genuinely really looking forward to allowing other people to hear your story.
Yes.
I've been able to hear it and really powerful. It's one of those stories that has a lot of heartbreak, trauma, difficulty, but it has hope and it has healing and it has restoration. I think those are the best stories, and Christ is at the center of it. So we're going to turn you loose just to kind of share your journey with addiction and also with recovery. And then afterwards, we'd love to just kind of ask you some questions. But Chad, it's yours. Most people are ready for like the silly game to get to know the guest. We're not doing that today. Chad's got just a great story. We don't want him to just share from his heart. So Chad, it's yours.
Well, first off, thank you guys for having me.
No problem.
And thank you guys that are watching or listening. My name is Chad Helm, and I'll kind of just get right into it. I just celebrated 3 years clean and sober. And I was a heroin and meth addict for 13 to 14 years. But I'll tell you a little bit about my life journey. As a kid, I was born when my parents were 15 and 16 years old, and obviously they were kids trying to raise kids, and I ended up being adopted at 1 year old by my grandparents. And my grandfather was an alcoholic, grandmother was a gambler, this and that. And the first 5 years of a child's life are the most important years of their life, because that's when they learn mommy, daddy, yes, no. They start to establish them basic things of life. And, to be very blunt, I was taught manipulation, lying and stuff at a very early age. And because of my home life. And at 5 years old, my father felt that, it was time that he got his son back. And my grandparents ended up signing me back over to my father. At 7 years old, my dad married a woman that was 13 years older than him with 2 kids. And needless to say, at first things were great, but then I started being sexually molested at 7 years old. And that went on for almost 7 years till I was 14. And as kids, we tend to try to, instead of self-medicating, like we do as adults sometimes, as kids we start turning to other things, whether it's cutting, suicidal thoughts, isolation, bullying other people to lift ourselves up, or just doing these random rebellion acts because we're lost individuals, or we're suffering or hurting in our home life, and we don't know how to cry out for help. So after about 3 years of that happening in my life, I would lie to myself and tell myself that this is the way life's supposed to be. And the reason why I did that is, so first off, it wouldn't hurt as bad mentally, emotionally, physically, the whole 9 yards. And, I would deceive myself, and I developed that character trait as life continued to progress. And it became a natural thing to me. I didn't know who God or Jesus was. My family was not into the church. I had heard about the Bible, but never seen a Bible. I've heard about the church, never stepped a foot in the church. And, my life was kind of keep up with the Joneses, go to work, come home, eat a family dinner, go to the sports events, and do the same routine every day. And life really had no meaning. So as this time went on, I remember trying to talk to a family member of mine and to inform them of what was happening to me. And the fear of God got put in me, and so I kept my mouth shut. And the reason why is because if the situation was brought to light, it would cause some separation in the family. And my family at the time tended to care more about money and material things than dealing with an issue with their own flesh and blood. And so, I then developed, I got to be a peacekeeper. Don't cause problems. Don't cause conflict. Whatever you're dealing with, deal with it. And as time progressed, at 14 years old, I remember standing in my high school, and I was getting bullied at school. I was overweight as a kid. I was contemplating suicide. I already had a plan thought out. And as I was standing in the hallway, there was this guy that came up, and I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Remember the Titans or Facing the Giants or something like that, when the guy prays for the students before the sporting events. There was a guy named Mark Howard in Mount Zion, Illinois, which is around where the area that I'm from, and he would come and be a mentor to the kids. He was a person that loved people genuinely with no ulterior motives, and he was retired. And he came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder, and for some reason I remember I just turned around and I grabbed this guy and I just hugged him and I started bawling. And so he ends up taking me to the principal's office, and we call the counselor in, this and that, and they sit me down and they said, "What's going on, Chad?" And I just told him everything, and it was the first time in my 14 years of being alive that I had been honest about the thoughts I was having, about the feelings that I was feeling, about the plan that I had to end my life, and about the torture, torment, and abuse that I was going through. And so I end up moving away from home at 15 years old and started raising myself. I would live from house to house. I lived from family member to family member. And, it came to a point to where I was causing problems in other family members' homes because I was raised one way and taught some things, and then I'd go to the next family member and it'd be totally different. And it's no different than a foster child sometimes. They're tossed from home to home, and they never really truly have a mother or father until they're with somebody permanently. And so I ended up becoming homeless. And I remember sleeping, for a year and a half, my high school had a football field out back behind it, and it had an announcing stadium in the middle of the bleachers. That bathroom floor below that announcing stadium was my home for almost a year and a half. And I would go into school an hour before early bird PE, which was 7 a.m. I would shower in the men's locker room. And I would go to Walmart and I would find a pair of clothes, go in the fitting room, rip off the tags, and leave because I didn't have money. And that was my way of survival. I didn't know any better. And I would eat at school. I was that kid that would I was so afraid of opening up or expressing my needs because the fear of being judged, perception of other people, and I was already an outcast in school and bullied daily. So at 17 years old, I started shooting pool, and I was in a bar underage, and hustled this guy out of a couple $100 within about 10 minutes. And after the game, he says, "Young man, what do you do for a living?" And of course, I made up this long, drawn-out story that, I'm in college. I get out of college at 11 a.m. every day, and currently I'm not employed. He said, "Great, what are you going to school for?" I said, "Business management and sales and marketing." And he said, "Oh, really? Okay." So we started talking. He says, "You ever thought about selling cars?" And I said, "Well, yeah, my family's got this, and I just went into this lie is what it was." And he says, "Well, can you be at my office tomorrow at 12:30? And I said, "Sure." He says, "I'd like you to come try to sell cars for me." I said, "Oh, okay." And here I am. I'm 17 years old, 2 weeks before my 18-year-old birthday. Not even supposed to be in this bar. Didn't know a lick about selling cars. But I was there that following day. My first month sold 22 units, made a little over $13,000. And as a 17-year-old that just turned 18, that's a lot of money for a kid that's been sleeping on a bathroom floor in a high school, a person that's been stealing clothes and food to survive every day. I finally felt like, okay, this is my breakthrough. So I went and bought me a little Dodge Neon, green, and I got me in a little efficiency, like studio apartment. A guy named Bill Noble in Mount Zion, Illinois, gave me the place, and without any background references or anything, he knew my situation. I was honest with him, and he gave me a place. So I still had several $1,000s left over, and I had this great plan that, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to do this, do that, and I always wanted to be a motivational speaker. And even as a kid, and I would watch YouTube videos, and I wanted to use my pain as somebody else's gain. And the only way to do that, and I'm not trying to rhyme here, but the only way to do that is to not allow my pain to go in vain. And, you know, so after that first 3 months of selling cars, I just so happened to be the top salesman 3 consecutive months in a row, and they had a party for me at my general manager's house. And we're in the basement of my general manager's house. The men are all downstairs, the kids and women are upstairs. And he reaches into the cabinet after about an hour of being there and everybody drinking and partying. And it was a plate of this white powdery substance. Now, I had never seen or touched a drug in my life or even had a sip of alcohol up to this point. I'm 18 years old, 3 months into the car business, getting ready to graduate high school. And the plate got to me, and I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be like them. I was longing for that father figure, that male role model. And I was tired of being the outcast. So I snorted a line off this plate, and when I did it, it was like all my anger, fear, frustration, guilt, shame, remorse, everything that was built up inside of me that was condemning me was gone. But that only lasted for about 10 minutes, and I wanted more and wanted more. So I remember waking up upstairs in their spare bedroom the following day, and I guess I had blacked out. And it was cocaine, it was ether-based cocaine laced with heroin was my first drug ever. And I was 18 years old. So that habit went from once a month to once a week to 7 days a week, to the point I was snorting 2 8-balls, which is 7 grams of ether-based cocaine a day. And those of you that may have experienced addiction or addiction in the family, you know, that's several $100s a day, 7 days a week. And I continued in the car business, and I thought I was that functioning addict. Then I started drinking every day. Then I thought I was a functioning alcoholic. And the disease of addiction progressed in my life. And I was so empty. I was so miserable. I was so dead. I was so demonic. You know, I hated everyone and everything. All I cared about was that next fix, and not feeling the pain that was rooted inside of me. And so I ended up getting arrested for my first time right before I turned 20 years old for white-collar crimes. And I was making $80,000 to $90,000 a year at 18 to 20 years old. And but I was still broke. And the reason being is because when you're in addiction, I don't care if you're making $1 million a year, it's never enough. And you know, any program that you work in addiction, even Celebrate Recovery, which is the faith-based program of addiction, you know, we talk about how one's too many, 1,000's never enough. And you know, that's so true. So I went through that process, got arrested, got back out, and went back to selling cars. Then I jumped up to doing finance. My income shot up tremendously, and then I got involved in doing shooting heroin. And so my addiction went from snorting cocaine to shooting heroin. And as soon as I started doing that, my life was a downhill spiral from there. Overdosed 4 times, was pronounced dead 1 out of the 4. And I actually have a video of that, and it's crazy because I watched myself die, but yet I still chose to go get high again after that. And that's what we do. We've what do you call that? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Insanity. Yeah. You know, so I was living this life of chaos and insanity. So I end up getting arrested again. This time I got sentenced to 10 years in the Department of Corrections outside of Chicago, Illinois. Served 5 out of the 10. I was raped my second week in prison. My top 7 teeth were shattered with the handicap shower spigot as I was raped. And so I remember waking up on a fiberglass stretch board being carried to the medical unit of the penitentiary, and then getting told what had happened to me. You know, and any of you that may be listening or watching that's been through any type of mental, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, you know that that's a trauma that you live with. It's not something that just goes away. But it's what we do with that trauma. It's what we do with the PTSD. It's how we handle it. It's the actions that we take, you know. And but at the time, I didn't know how to handle it or how to do it. But all I know is for the rest of my life, every time I brush my teeth and see my teeth that were implanted, it's a flashback and a reminder of what happened to me in the penitentiary. And so once again, inside prison, I had to find a way to self-medicate myself. So I went to making hooch in prison. I went to buying pills off the deck from people. I went to just doing different things to numb that trauma that had happened and took place. I end up, after 2.5 years of being in prison, I get a card, and the card's from a family member that says, you need to call home. Grandma's not doing well, and you need to possibly say your goodbyes. Well, my entire life, I had always told my grandma, Grandma, you're my hero. And I used to lay in her arms as a baby, and I remember it clear up until I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And I'd rub her face, and I'd say, Grandma, will you marry me? And, you know, so she was not doing well, and I decided I went and I called, and the people that were there, the nurses and stuff at the home taking care of her, answered the phone, and they took the phone to her. And she found the strength, and she says, Chatty, can I ask you something? I said, yeah, Grandma. She says, when are you going to be my hero? Is exactly what I said. I'm sitting inside 4 penitentiary walls, 2.5 years still left to serve. Grandma's on her deathbed. She dies, I can't go to the funeral. I'm totally, my dignity, pride, and everything's been stripped away from me. And I have no one and nowhere to turn to. Because you have to remember, I didn't know who God, Jesus, any of this stuff was. And I said, Grandma, how can I be your hero? She says, you can start right now. I said, well, by doing what? She said, I want you to write a book. I said, write a book? I said, I failed reading and writing. I hate school. She says, no. She says, this is going to be easy for you, but hard at the same time. I said, what am I supposed to write about, Grandma? She says, your life story. I says, no. And I start crying. I said, Grandma, I can't write about my life. It hurts too bad to think about it. I don't even want to talk about it. She says, Chatty, listen to me. She says, you can either continue to wallow in your misery, or you can start writing your life story out. In return, you're going to have inner healing inside as you start to release them things, and you can help so many other people that are going through the same stuff that you're going through. Wow. I said, well, what do I title it, Grandma? She said, Stuck by Choice. I said, stuck by choice, why that? She says, grandson, because in life, every situation or circumstance you end up in is because of a choice you make as an adult or a choice that an adult made for you as a child. She says, right now, as an adult, you have the choice to either wallow in self-pity, sitting inside a penitentiary due to your own choices, or you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, move forward by never giving up, and start writing out your life story and make something of yourself even inside 4 penitentiary walls. She says, grandson, freedom doesn't start externally, it starts internally. This is where Jesus came into play.
Your grandma has a ton of wisdom.
Yes.
I mean, if she just threw that all out on the phone,
yes.
Your grandma's amazing.
She is amazing. And wait till you hear the end part here.
Yeah.
So she says, Chatty, just surrender. I said, Grandma, what do you mean? She says, that's for you to figure out. Just surrender. She hung up the phone.
Wow.
So needless to say, I go back to my cell block and I turn on my little ClearTech TV, and TBN's on the TV show. So I start watching this and I start listening, and I'm listening to the music, and then that became my TV show 7 days a week, all day long, every moment that I was in the cell. And I started going through these feelings and emotions. Now listen to what I'm saying, feelings and emotions. And I started to say, okay, God, if you're real, then you'll do this. If you're real, prove this to me and I'll do this. I started making deals with him. You know what I'm saying? And it didn't work. So anyways, I go through this process, and I wrote 177 pages of that book. I'm still writing it to this day. And it is titled Stuck by Choice. And then the co-title is A Story About a Young Addict's Life. And on the picture of the cover, it has myself standing on a beach with the sun side on one hand and a cuff and chain broken on this side. and then the demonic part on the other side of my past. And so anyways, I'm doing all of this, and it comes time for me to get released. Guess who picked me up from prison?
Grandma.
Grandma.
Amen.
Grandma beat the illness. She was the one that picked me up. And I get in the car. She was more healthier then than she had been in the last several years.
Wow.
And she says, "Where do you want to go, grandson?" And so I told her. And she would not allow me to live with her until I proved myself. So what did I do? I went to my mother's. And I remember sitting there talking to my mother. And my mother looked over at me and she says, "Chatty, will you reach into that drawer over there and hand me that knife out of there?" I'm thinking she's going to use it, so I reach over and I go to hand it to her. She says, "Now start stabbing me in the chest, because this is what you've done to me every single day of your adult life." What she was trying to tell me is I'm killing her. I've got to change. And so my first thought is, okay, I got to get high. So I run out of the kitchen, I run out the garage door as I'm running down the road to leave to go find drugs. My sister comes running out. She's 13 years old at the time. And she says, "Chatty, when are you going to stop being just a picture, card, letter, and a phone call and actually be my brother?" So I tell myself that I got to get high, that I can't deal with this. And so you think that would change me. And I remember my mom would come looking for me all throughout the night. She found me a couple times, and she'd pull me out of dope houses. As I'm sitting there shooting heroin, people are falling out on the floor. And I just wanted to die. Like, I had no desire to live. You know, so on 10/10 of 2015, I'm going to speed through my story here to get to the now. On 10/10 of 2015, I was in a relationship with a female. I was newly engaged, 2 kids. Her name was Courtney, and we were living together in Mattoon, Illinois. But I honestly took advantage of her to support my addiction, to have a roof over my head, but yet she tried loving me any way possible. And so I end up planning on committing suicide on this day again for the 3rd time in my life. And the reason why I chose that date, 10/10 of 2015, was because inside the penitentiary or prison, when they holler 10/10 over the radios in Illinois, that stands for staff in distress, inmate hurt, fight in progress, or need help. And I was on my way home after going and picking up drugs because my plan was to go home and overdose. And I get pulled over for my license plate light being burnt out. Okay, check this out. It's a God thing. I'm on Bluetooth with my mother at the time that I get pulled over, telling my mom this is going to be the last time she talks to me.
Oh, wow.
That I love you, Mom. You want to hang up the phone, you're not going to hear what's getting ready to happen. And she says, "No, please, Chatty, stop." My mom was 2.5 hours away from me in Chicago, Illinois. And so I hit what I thought was the end button, but it wasn't. It was the button that muted my mom, or that muted part of the conversation, but yet she still could hear everything that was going on that I was saying in the car. So this cop comes up to my window, and he's got his gun drawn automatically, because in the system, from how many times I had been arrested prior, I came up as armed and dangerous and a habitual criminal. And he says, "Mr. Helm, I need you to put your hands on the steering wheel, and with your right hand, I need you to slowly grab your license, registration, and insurance card." And next thing you know, I see another cop coming up on the passenger side, and with this flashlight and looking in, and in my passenger seat, I had a baby wipe diaper box. And it was full of needles, spoons, rigs, heroin, cocaine, crack, and meth. And they could see in there, they could see a little bit through the top of it, this and that. He says, "Actually, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." And I said, "No, you're going to shoot me. Otherwise, you're going to chase me." And my plan was, I wanted him to kill me. And my mother's hearing all of this. So I started screaming, "Shoot me," and I put my car in drive, put my foot on the brake, and I start to roll up the window. And as I roll up in the window, I start to take off. Well, I saw something out of the corner of my eye because I had blacked out for a minute as I was taking off. And once my vision started to come back, I see this officer was jammed in my window, and I was dragging him down the road in a high-speed chase. I had rolled his arm up in my window. And so anyways, my goal wasn't to hurt nobody else. It was just to hurt myself. So I slam on the brakes, and I hit the down button, and the officer drops. And I continue to take off, and I found an anhydrous ammonia tank it was 2 counties out of where they were chasing me from, and my plan was to hit that tank and die. And well, about 11 vehicles, officers were chasing me by this point, and 2 of them were canine units, and they barricaded. They saw what I was going to do, so they barricaded this anhydrous ammonia tank. And so I slammed on my brakes, the car spun out, and next thing I know, they're busting out the windows. They pulled me out of the vehicle, and as they slammed me down into the rocks to handcuff me, I'm looking over at the canine unit vehicles and the 2 cops that were standing there, and one had his gun drawn and one didn't. And so they end up picking me up, toss me in the cop car. They take me to the jail. They go through an interview process. They put me in booking. As I'm sitting in booking, this officer comes up to the cell and he says, "Chad, I know you don't know me, but you're better than this." He said, "Just surrender." What did Grandma tell me in prison?
Just surrender.
Just surrender. So I tried spitting on this cop through the mesh hole of the jail door. I cursed him out, told him that he don't care about me, he's just a pig, and I called him every name in the book. And he left. And about another week goes by, and I'm now down into the trod, and it's on second shift lockdown. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and I hear a peck on the cell door. I was in a 2-man cell, and it was this officer. He says, "Listen to me, Chad." He says, "I know that you don't want to hear from me." He says, "But dude, looking at you is like looking at my own child who I just arrested a few weeks ago, going through the same stuff that you're going through. You are better than this. Just surrender." And I heard the chuck hole, which is the little door that they can pass your mail or food through of the jail door. And I heard it open up, and I looked down, and a Bible. He handed me a Bible through the chuck hole. He says, "Just surrender." And he walked away. And so I remember dropping to my knees in the jail cell that night. My cellie or bunkie was asleep at the time, and I said, "God, my way is death, your way is life. I can't do this on my own no more. Please help me." And I got up, I got back in my bed, and I laid there and thought all night long. And then I get up the next day, and I knew I wanted something different, but I didn't know how to get it. I had never been led to that. And so anyways, about 2 months goes by, and I get called to come cuff up that I have a visitor. Still in jail fighting this case. I'm facing 6 to 30 years, Class X sentencing. I've got charges piled up. And so they take me down to the library, and there's this cop and this elderly gentleman sitting down there with a pamphlet. And they sit me across from him, they uncuff me, and he slides me this pamphlet over, and he says, "Before you read that, you tell me your life story," and he says, "If you lie to me or keep anything out, it'll be one of the worst decisions you make." I said, "Okay." I admitted guilt to everything. I told him everything. I spilled my guts to this guy. He says, "Now read my story." So I opened up this pamphlet. It says, "Released through Jesus Prison Ministries, founder Jim Helton of Mattoon, Illinois." His story matched my story to a T. The same charges that I had, he had once had. The same abuse I went through, he had once been through. And so he says, "Chad," he says, "what's one thing you want when I leave this place?" I said, "Well, I'm facing up to 30 years of my life in prison." I said, "To pray that my mother's still alive when I get released." He said, "I'll pray for you anyways." He says, "What's one thing you want?" I said, "Well, to pray for my aunt that her health gets better. She's been in the hospital for the last couple of weeks, not doing too well." He says, "Chad, stop with the praying and Jesus stuff." He says, "I'm a pastor. I'm going to pray for you anyways." He says, "If you could have one thing right now, what would it be?" I said, "To be able to walk out them doors and wrap my arms around my family one last time and a chance to prove myself." He says, "I don't know." He says, "But I'm going to come back and talk to you in about an hour and a half." I said, "Okay." My bond was $50,000 full cash.
There is hope for those who are facing addiction. If you or someone you know would like to hear the rest of Chad Helms' story, we encourage you to look for part 2, which will come very soon. Spoiler alert, there is hope, and there is a really good ending, so please come back to hear the rest.